But let's go to another event at the Walt Disney Birthplace in Chicago, Illinois. So let's go on in. Okay, here we are at the Walt Disney Birthplace here in Chicago, Illinois, and I'm with your name?
Charlie Pipel.
And Charlie, what role did you play here?
I'm the project architect.
Okay. So let's bring us back. When did you get started with this? How did it get approached? Let's hear the...
Yeah, so it's been a number of years since Brent and Dina purchased the home, and they engaged me early on in the process to try to sort of peel away the layers of the onion to figure out what the original house looked like. It was quite a task because the house had been converted from a single family to a two family, and then reconverted back to a single family. So that's what you see today.
Okay. So did you find the original plans of the design of the house, or how that?
Yeah. So no, unfortunately, there were no real plans to the house. It was probably just done on the fly, a lot of the work. But we just know through some forensic demolition and just sort of some observations about the materials that were used when the changes occurred over time. And then we sort of reverse engineered the process. So we could tell, like, for instance, that the house was actually lifted up off the ground in about 1920. And then we also know that a porch was put on at a similar point at about between 1920 and 1930. So those changes were made. And then I think approximately that time is when it was converted from a single family to a two family residence.
About how long was the process from when you started to where we are now?
That's a great question. I'd have to go back in my mind, maybe 5 years, 6 years, something like that from the time I've been involved in it. Yeah. That's a guess.
5 years, pretty much a standard renovation?
No.
Okay. Roughly how long would one?
So, I mean, if you had funding available, I would say 1.5 years or something like that would be probably typical, because you'd want about, several months to do sort of investigative work and the drawings and the research. And then you get a contractor, a general contractor in, and the bid's let, and you get your permits, and then you do the construction, and then you cut the ribbon. It's been an expensive project, and funding's been sort of touch and go. These events are great because people get to see it, and then that always helps with the funding. So
you get some potential new funders that walk through.
That's how that works. Yeah.
And is there more work that's going to be done, or is this pretty much done from your end?
I mean, as you see the house now, as you're walking through the interiors, aside from cleanup and furnishing, this is pretty much how it will appear to the visitor.
Did you have to go after like local craftsmen, master craftsmen, or outside the Chicago area?
We've actually employed both folks in Chicago, and also we've used folks outside of Chicago.
What do you think people are going to be most impressed when they walk through here?
It's funny. The colors, I think, are rather striking. And the colors were sort of based on a color analysis that we did. I think just the fact also that you could have so many people crammed into one very small little house, because there were additions put onto the back. So the original house was much smaller than it is right now. And if you can imagine people huddled in this house without like central heat, for instance, it would have been a pretty tough place to live, I would imagine, back in about 1901 when Walt was born, and certainly 1892 when the house was built.
And this is the room we're standing where he was born.
Yeah, that's I always, whenever I talk to folks about this, it's like, what do we know and what can we surmise intelligently? I would make the statement that I believe that this is where he probably was born, because we know that lore is that he was born at home, and we know that most children of that age were born in their home. They were not born in a hospital. And we also know that, he probably had a smaller bedroom. This is probably the large bedroom where the parents had. This is a wall where a bed would have been just by the placement of the window. So you can make some intelligent assumptions. So I would say with some certainty that this is the room that he was born in. Yeah.
How long have you been?
So I'm a professor at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago.
Oh, wow.
So, I teach in the Historic Preservation Department, and I've been there for 20 years now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that's, I do, kind of historic preservation consulting work. And this is sort of a labor of love for me, this project, you can imagine, with 5 years.
So did they know you, or how did you get involved?
Yeah, they found me. Okay. Yeah, probably just by referrals and reputation, they found me. So it was fortunate that we we connected, and I'm glad I've been able to offer some assistance to him. So
Now, what does this mean for this house? Was this going to be on the board of historic preservation?
No. So the house has a really interesting history regarding its landmark designation. It was brought in front of the city council years ago. And then for one reason or another, the house was pulled off the work plan by the City Landmarks Commission. I think primarily over the objection of the current or the previous owner of the house. Okay. The house did not look like this when it was, so it was really the site of the Walt Disney house. Because when you looked at it, there was nothing about it that's really said Disney. It was kind of covered in aluminum siding, and the porch was not there, and the windows were all wrong, and certainly the interiors were all different than they are now. So it would have been a completely different animal that got designated. So I know that Brent and Dina did talk to the Landmarks Commission here about potential landmark designation, and they seemed favorable at the time, but they wanted to see more progress in terms of the restoration before they would make a determination on whether or not they would recommend it to the city council. So that's a political process. I mean, in my mind, it's a landmark. Whether or not it's an official, Chicago landmark that's a political process.
Well, because a lot of people either think of Florida or California.
Yeah.
That he's born. So this was, to me, same thing. I think this is actually historic.
There's only one birthplace. Yeah, he was only born once.
And your last question, what's your final impression of the overall when this is now all done?
Oh, it's pretty impressive. Yeah, I'm finally. It's really nice that people get to come in and see it, and it's nice that when people have a certain passion about Walt Disney and Roy Disney and their work and what inspired them, and then they can come in here. They can actually feel sort of a kinship or a closeness to that, and that's nice. It's like a touchstone for history, right? Yeah, that's what this house is about, really.
Okay, here we are at the Walt Disney Birthplace in Chicago, Illinois, and I'm with your name?
Roy Patrick Disney.
Roy, it's just an honor that you're here as well today. Now, you're the great-grandson?
I'm the grandson of Roy O. and the great-nephew of Walt.
Well, let's hear about how does it feel just coming into the birthplace of Walt Disney?
It's eerie, and it's awesome to think that Walt lived here.
Yeah, absolutely. Any stories of Walt Disney that maybe we don't know about that back in the days?
Well, he lived here till he was 4. Elias, his dad, came here to work on the World's Fair in 1893, and he built this house, and his wife designed this house and was on the deed, which is kind of forward-looking for 1893. Oh, wow. So that was pretty cool. That was something I had no idea about.
Right. When did you first hear about this project?
The family's known about this house for a long time, but it's been sitting in a bad neighborhood. It was neglected, it was run down, and it never seemed worth the investment to fix it up until someone decided to tear it down, and then everybody got motivated. Yeah. So I've known about it for a long time, but it's really come along.
Because I think maybe some people think that maybe Walt Disney was born in California or Florida, and it is actually in Chicago.
Right. Well, I know he's frozen in Florida. No, don't take that. There's actually 2 towns in Spain that claim to be his birthplace. So then here we are.
Absolutely. Let's hear about you. What's your background? What have you been doing?
So I'm obviously born and raised in the Disney family and the Disney company. Worked there for 10 years. I still do a lot of public speaking about the family and about the history because I know it as well as anyone. Yeah. And I run an investment company.
Yeah. What was your fascination or major accomplishment that you think Walt Disney did over the years?
Besides, when you come from a humble place like this and you achieve what he did, I think that's as inspiring as it gets. But he brought joy to the world in a place that could use it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going on today. You got I think the Mary Poppins Returns coming, and people getting back in the '60s mood of what his era was back then as well.
Well, and the other thing is family, and you realize how important family is. Yes. And Disney is something that brings families together, which is, I think, a very positive thing in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely Roy Disney as well. He continued on with Fantasia 2000 and just a bunch of other films and projects as well. So it just seemed like that whole family was energetic in the art world.
Yeah, well, my dad was more of a businessman than an artist, but he knew that animation was worth saving because back in the 80s they wanted to shut it down. Think about that.
I remember that.
So he managed to save it and renew it.
Anything else you want to say about the house or the Disney family in general before we go?
No, just I'm honored that people would invest their lives and livelihoods into a place like this, for my family, that's pretty astounding. So.
Because it's not just the house, but they're going to use it for the youth as well.
They're going to go beyond just the house. They're going to use it as inspiration for children. They're going to try to create a children's learning center. Because, Walt, look where he came from. And every child should know that story.
Okay, here we are at the Walt Disney Birthplace here in Chicago, Illinois. And I am with your names?
Dina Benedon.
And Brent Young.
Well, and you're both the, I shouldn't say founders of the organization.
Of the Walt Disney Birthplace, yes.
Okay, well, let's take us back. How did this all get started?
Well, in 2013, we purchased the home. We were doing research on a project, and we found out that the home was in Chicago that Walt Disney was born in, and we came out and took a look at it. It was in really bad shape. We met with the owner. We knew it needed to be saved, and Dean and I purchased the home with the idea that we were going to restore it and save it for kids to understand that Walt Disney was a real person in the real world, and it wasn't that there's a real family story here.
And because people may think he was born in California or Florida, but it was actually here. Right?
It was, and we work in the industry, and we didn't even know that he was born in Chicago. And I think because he only lived here for the first 4.5 years of his life, so it's not very well known. And that's something it's not very well known even here in Chicago. So we're getting the word out.
Now, today we're celebrating phase 1 of the project. Is that correct? Or let's hear what phases we got going.
Yeah, right. So phase 1 is really the preservation and restoration of the home. So as you can see, we're now like in a pretty well-built interior home space, and it's an empty palette really for us to now fill it with all the magic that's going to make it a great experience, and also we need to really make it accessible to everybody so everybody can enjoy it. So at this point, we're just moving forward with continued fundraising and to get the necessary means to really give it the accessibility and magic that people would expect in Walt Disney's birthplace. But I think we're making good progress. Yeah.
And you got the Disney backing you as well, the family as well. When you approached them with this project, what was their reaction?
Well, we didn't really approach them, so it was 2016, and they were having the shareholders meeting here in Chicago. And Bob Iger came out, and he gave a grant to the Walt Disney Birthplace, which was really helpful. That really catapulted us here to the finish line, which was very, very instrumental in getting us to this point.
I'm very impressed on just the whole architecture and everything. Did you guys find out anything interesting along the ways of this process?
Oh, we found a lot of things interesting. It's been an education and a real fun journey with our architect, who is Charlie Pipel. And Charlie is the preservation architect at the Art Institute here in Chicago. So he has just been a wealth of knowledge. And it's kind of like an onion, we were saying, where we just keep peeling apart this treasure here and finding new information as we go.
And you said, so the next part is actually installing sort of the interactive things for the kids? Or?
Yeah, I think, well, for us, the next part is really to make it accessible so people can come in. Right now we can't have the public in, but we have private events. There are things that we need to do to make it, a public space. So that's the next phase, and at the same time we're doing fundraising for all the cool magic things that we're going to do to the house to bring it to life. Because ultimately the goal is to turn this into a time machine, to have people be able to go back in time and experience what it was like, what was the environment like, tell the story of Walt Disney's and Roy Disney's beginning of their journey, and how important Chicago was and how important this neighborhood was in creating what's now the biggest media corporation in the world. with the most beloved characters in the world, like Mickey Mouse, of course.
Got him here today too, and we want to keep this going and fundraise and help you with the fundraising. Is there a website that people can go to log in?
Sure. Yeah, at the Walt Disney Birthplace.org. There you can donate to the project, but we also have bricks, and we have other things like windows and plaques and dedications that you can purchase, and that purchase goes into the donation, but also becomes a part of the home.
Well, once again, we thank you so much for continuing on with this project. It's when I was at the Creative Days, and now this one, it's just getting better and better, and we appreciate all your hard work on this, and thank you so much for holding this event.
Thank you.